We begin on this Friday, the 13th, with perhaps the biggest story of the day. At 1 o'clock, Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones announced that the release of three-time Pro Bowler wide receiver Dez Bryant. It is official. He has been cut from the Dallas Cowboys. Guys, we are less than 2 weeks away from the draft, and we've got a packed house here on NFL Live. Hello, everybody. Jeff Saturday, Chris Mortensen, and Field Yates. I'm Diana Rossini. The Cowboys, guys, they hit the field on Monday, but certainly they had to address some big news, and that was the future of Dez Bryant. That decision has been made. They have cut the 9-year veteran. Well, Jerry Jones, he released a statement just a few minutes ago saying, as an organization, we hold Dez Bryant in the highest regard. We're grateful for his passion, spirit, contributions to this team for the past 8 years. He will always be a valued member of our family. This was not an easy decision. It was made based upon doing what we believe is in the best interest of the Dallas Cowboys. We arrived at this crossroad collectively with input from several voices within the organization. Ultimately, we determined it was time to go in a new direction. So that's from the owner. Let's hear from the receiver. Let's hit the tweet deck. Dez tweeted, "Let's start the process." Then another tweet. "Cowboy Nation, I need you to know this wasn't my decision. I will always love y'all. Forever Dallas in my heart." So what happened here, guys? Well, Dez and Dak simply didn't connect. Prescott barely completed half his passes to Bryant over his career, averaging a full yard more per attempt to other receivers since the start of 2016. But it wasn't just Dallas wideout Dez who didn't stack up to. The 52% completion percentage between Dak and Dez is the worst of any quarterback receiver combo in the league. That's a strong stat right there, and that certainly tells you the story. So our senior insider here, Chris Mortensen, on the desk. And Chris, you're in touch with all parties in this. You've been all over this story. What more can you tell us about this meeting today?
Well, listen, we saw a statement from Jerry Jones, and he said, several people in the organization weighed in on this, and he makes the final call. We talked about this yesterday on NFL Live. When he cut T.O., he said, T.O.'s here, and I'm here, but the Cowboys are there. Cowboys are bigger than anybody. But several people in this organization, and you can say probably from coaches to personnel, to even his son, Stephen Jones, I think there was a feeling that it was time to move on. He's not producing at a level we thought, in part because of injuries, since we signed him to the big contract in 2015. And oh, by the way, we had to get contracts done with right guard Zach Martin, a Pro Bowl player, and with DeMarcus Lawrence, their franchise guy, who's taking up $17 million on the cap. So I think it was a matter of performance plus the need to just flat out move on. And they have added receivers to their roster this offseason.
Certainly a lot for this Dallas Cowboys team to address. But when you hear on April 13th that they decide to cut him, the first thing you think is the timing. That for Dez and that for the Dallas Cowboys, it doesn't seem to work to their advantage. Field, what do you make of the timing?
Well, a couple things. They do begin their offseason program on Monday. So in some ways, that was a soft deadline. At that point, you are back to work, so to speak. And not that there won't be other player acquisitions, but you kind of scrub the decks of players that you don't anticipate having around. On the other hand, I understand when people say, why not do this the day after the season was over? Why not do this at the beginning of the free agency? First of all, I don't think this was an easy decision. This was not something they just snapped their fingers and said, let's do it. Several people contributed to this conversation, according to Jerry Jones. Moreover, maybe if the Cowboys didn't need to make a move that would be in part impacted by the $8.5 million in cap space they picked up, they wouldn't make this move. They may have said, listen, until we need the cap space, our hand is not being forced on this Dez Bryant decision. I think it's all of those factors in sum lead to the timing of this release.
Yeah, this was a domino effect. I couldn't agree more, right? And to Field's point, this is the business decision made by the owner and basically the organization as a whole of, hey, we need cash, this is what we're going to do. This is the worst part of the business, but this is the business of football. You're being paid as a one. You got a $16 million plus cap number. You haven't produced like a one in the last 2 years. As much as we like you, as much as we're fond of you, what you've done, what you've added to this organization as a whole, all of those things, no one can take any of that away. But at the end of the day, this is dollars and cents. And at this point of the year, they're going to start the preseason now. This is where they're moving. The OTAs are coming. Let the guys who they think may get reps take those reps, because you're not taking that away when a guy's on the field. So now is definitely the time, and they had to make the move.
But the fact they didn't talk pay cut or restructure tells you that all those other people in the organization, they wanted to move on.
Right.
And it was just a matter of Jerry making the final decision. Okay, I'm with you on this one.
You know,
so that decision is the final decision is made by Jerry, but I think there was almost a unanimous sentiment in the organization that he's not the player. He doesn't fit us right now. We need to move on, and Jerry finally signed off on it.
This could have happened much earlier. You know, this was a team that was in the market for Sammy Watkins,
Right.
you know, at the beginning portion of free agency. If Sammy had been signed up, Des Bryant may have been a free agent a month and a half ago or a month ago when free agency started. They didn't need to create this $8.5 million in cap space. They mostly went bargain hunting in free agency. Now that need could evolve, whether it's because a Zach Martin deal's imminent, the DeMarcus Lawrence contract could be extended beyond the current franchise tag year. But for now, the Cowboys create $8.5 million in cap space. Des Bryant now looking for a new home.
And you saw their numbers. They're the lowest tandem, right? The lowest duo in the league. So to Mort's point, everybody in the organization is like, hey, listen, money aside, it's not producing. It's not working. So we have to go a different direction and find someone that's going to click with Dak and the Ezekiel Elliott plan and the whole way we're going to run our offense. He hasn't gotten involved in the way we wanted it to. So it's more than just the dollar side.
Yeah.
It is hey, we're gonna formally say this isn't going to work.
And Jeff, that quote from Stephen Jones on our friend Ed Warder's podcast about how Dak Prescott isn't a Tony Romo, where Tony Romo worked great with Des Bryant.
Right.
He needs a receiver to run crisper routes, stuff that they're studying in that meeting room needs to be seen out in the field, and that's not really what Dak's style is. So that really stood out to me a few months ago when he said that, because that told you a lot. But in the end, as Chris, you point out, Jerry makes the decision, at the end of the day.
It's the final call, but I think it was obvious that the rest of the organization felt this was the move to make.
Yeah. All right, so I love Twitter. Here's why. Des, back on it again. Here's the latest tweet. If I didn't have my edge, I got it now. I'm sorry, they gotta feel me. It's personal. It's very personal. So we aren't wondering how he feels about this decision.
If I didn't have my edge is a red flag to me right there. What do you mean if he actually puts the if in this himself, that he didn't have the same edge as he had maybe when he got paid that big contract in 2015? That's a red flag.
Do you think that's reaction to maybe what Jerry told him, or is that just reaction to fans and media?
It could be that. You know, I remember back in 2010, I was in the Chiefs front office at that point, working in the scouting department, and we had the 5th overall pick. And Des Bryant, on talent, was in that conversation to be one of the top 5 or 6 picks. But part of the conversation with Des obviously went way beyond the talent, the ability that you showed at Oklahoma State. It was, can this energy and this emotion and this edge that he just referenced be perhaps his greatest strength or perhaps his biggest vice at the same time? As Moore just said, if that edge is a sometimes, not an always part of your game, it can impact you. And I think that some of those numbers between Des and Dak last year, we can't make that simply about Des. Some of it was about Dak as a thrower as well.
And Zeke Elliott not being
available.
Yeah, that definitely plays.
But clearly as a player.
Let me say this about it, because from what he said on it, this is a painful day. So let's not read too much into, right? It hurts. Like, you just lost, you've been there. You have poured everything you have into being the best receiver you can be for this team. There is nothing easy about this. So whatever he's going to say today, all those feelings, all those emotions, take it all with a grain of salt. It is a painful day, and it is personal. And it's personal for every player, for their families, their wives, their children, their extended families. It is personal. This is what we have done. This is what we've sowed everything into our entire lives, right? Like it encompasses every area and every facet of your life. So be careful we don't jump on, what he's saying. He's hurting and he's going to voice it, but make no mistake, the guy still wants to play football and he'll find a home to go play.
Yeah, the feelings are certainly very raw at this moment. So we talk about, does he have the edge? Has he lost it? Can he perhaps go back to the receiver that he was, that we saw, just 3 years ago? Let's talk landing spots now. What team could use a Des Bryant? And granted, I was playing a little game of pretend when this news broke. I said, imagine if he went to the Patriots and they pulled sort of what they did with Randy Moss and he reinvigorated his career.
He's not Randy Moss.
But he's not. He's going to turn 30 in November. So let's talk about teams out there right now that could use a receiver like Des Field. What do you think?
Well, let's start. Before we get to teams specifically, Diana, in the 30 or so minutes before we went on the air, some conversation with people around the NFL. Not exactly, but in some ways, this is comparable to Richard Sherman being released in this regard. A player that you knew at the apex of his career might have been the best at his particular position. Dez is not coming off of a major injury like Richard Sherman is, but some of it might be your interest in Dez could be different if it's a one-year deal worth $4 million versus teams that will be interested in giving Dez a multi-year deal that might be comparable to, or maybe not quite as robust as Sammy Watkins or Allen Robinson. So I think that some of it depends on what Dez wants, right?
Well,
or what he's willing to take.
I look at Dez, and in fact, I think the skill set's kind of similar, which is Alshon Jeffrey when he was let go by the Bears. The Eagles signed him to a one-year deal, and he was willing to sign a one-year deal, I think for $7 million or right around there, and it paid off for him with a new contract. And I think that's kind of what Dez probably has to do right here. I'm not sure.
Or maybe a contract with incentives too, to perhaps try to prove that he still has it. Jeff?
From a player perspective, for where he is in his career, obviously close to 30 years old or 30 years old, right in that realm, go somewhere you're going to win. I can tell you, you don't want to go anywhere where, winning is secondary because you're going to make a little more money here or there, right? So go to where you're going to win, which is going to limit the field of where he wants, and go play for that one-year deal. Go get it. Get that money that you're going to get, whatever it is. Because, listen, you would have made the same if Dallas would have made you take that pay cut. There's not anybody out there who's got all this money. It's April. They've already spent the money, right?
Yep.
The die has been cast. We know
teams
what that
you're
looks
talking
like.
about.
Yeah, exactly. All that. Yeah, they've planned ahead. You can go to a bad team, make a bunch of money. Don't do that. Think about now being, going somewhere you can go win. Go make that money, but go win, more importantly, if you're Dez Bryant.
Cleveland would be interesting.
I was say, of the teams on this that have the most cap room as of right now, none of those actually strikes me as an obvious suitor for Dez Bryant, but, a couple of teams, and we'll talk about suitors or potential suitors throughout the show. I do think Arizona has a dramatic need at wide receiver. The question might be, is Dez comparable to Larry Fitzgerald from a skill set standpoint? Not carbon copies, but in some ways similar. And then Seattle, I think, is the other team. The elephant in the room is that this team certainly needs other pass catchers because right now it's Doug Baldwin, it's Tyler Lockett, it's a lot of, unproven type players. Jerron Brown signed from Arizona. So maybe those would be a couple of teams that might profile as, not totally rebuilding, but do have the space for another pass catcher.
All right, later on in the show, we're actually going to take a look at the Dallas Cowboys roster with Dez no longer on it. So we'll discuss that in just a few. But guys, still to come here on the show. In honor of Friday the 13th, we're going to show you highlights of NFL stars whose skills are downright scary. We're going to talk about that. Plus, Lamar Jackson's destination remains really one of the biggest mysteries of the draft. You don't want to miss what coaching legend Bill Parcells told our Chris Mortensen about the dynamic quarterback. And Seahawks quarterback alive. The New England Patriots begin voluntary workouts on Monday. Head coach Bill Belichick spoke to the media about a laundry list of topics, including the draft process, Lamar Jackson, Gronk. Our Mike Reese was up pretty early today in Foxborough for it all.
Diana, the Patriots are one of the most intriguing teams in this year's draft, as they now have 2 first-round picks, 2 in the second and 1 in the third. That gives them the currency to make a bold move up in the first round. That's currency they didn't have each of the last 2 years when their top pick was late in the second round and early in the third.
Going into those past 2 drafts, I would say we're able to eliminate a number of players just based on where we were selecting. This year is a little bit different than that. We need to know the draft from top to bottom. And potentially, so there's a handful of players that are probably out of reach, but realistically, just about everybody's in play other than a handful of guys.
One thing we know about Bill Belichick, he loves to trade on draft day. The Patriots have made 62 draft day trades in Belichick's 18 years. And here's something that might be music to Mel Kiper's ears. Belichick said Friday morning the Patriots conduct mock drafts to help them prepare for the actual draft. Belichick said sometimes it just sparks a conversation. We don't sit around and do it all day, but we do it as an exercise. Diana?
Well, practice certainly makes perfect, Mike. Thanks. Tom Brady, he's made it known that he thinks Lamar Jackson is a beast. He said it on Instagram, so, it's absolute truth. Bill Belichick doesn't like Instagram, but does he like Jackson? We like Mel Kiper. He joins the show now. Mel, what are the Patriots' plans with those 2 first-round picks?
Diane, I think to fill some key need areas. This is a team that has holes. They need an offensive tackle. Certainly, you think about the defensive line, linebacker, secondary, and I think those picks could do that. Homegrown talent needs to be brought into this Patriot organization. And now, do they want to move up? Say Lamar Jackson. If you want him, Buffalo's at 12 and 22. If they want to jump ahead of Buffalo, they could without giving up a ton. But certainly, if they stay at 23 and 31, you got to think at 23 about Colton Miller, offensive tackle out of UCLA. I think the best left tackle in this draft. He kind of fits the physical and athletic mold of Nate Solder. They just lost to the Giants. And he's the kind of guy at 6'8 and a half, going to be 315, 320 pounds very soon. Tremendously athletic, stronger than people thought. Had a very solid year with the UCLA Bruins, protecting that blind side of Josh Rosen. I think here's a kid who could be interesting there. And then get Mike Hughes, the cornerback out of Central Florida, with that 31st pick. He's not only a great corner, but he's also a dynamic punt and kickoff returner.
All right, Mal, thanks for that insight. Hang around because we're going to go back to you in just a few minutes. Guys, let's step inside the Verizon film room here. And, Field, I want to start with you. How do the Patriots as a whole, just taking a step back here, how do they approach the draft?
You know, Bill Belichick was asked during that press conference this morning about the team's needs. He said, needs? What are draft needs? You know, because the reality is if you have, let's just say, our biggest need, is left tackle. Then you take a guy at pick 23 that shouldn't be drafted in the first round at all, they can't play. If you can't play, you can't play. And if you can play and you're at the right spot in the draft, then that player should be viable. So the Patriots are a value-based drafting team. They're not going to force the card in if it's at a position they, quote-unquote, need if that player wouldn't bring them contributions either immediately or at some point down the road. So philosophically, don't always look at it as what do they need most for 2018. Look at it as which players are the best and can be a part of a core.
Yeah, and there's been talk about they can make a bold move up because they have 2 1s and 2 2s. They have a 3. They're missing 4 and 5s.
Yep.
But my vision or expectation for Belichick, if he's ever going to make a move, it wouldn't be bold up, right, but he could continue to move back and continue to collect picks. But if there's the right player there, obviously at 23, or somebody who's sliding they like, yeah, I can see him moving up a couple spots.
Sure. And both of your points are well taken. That this is the most complete, when you think about what Bill Belichick does to complete his roster, he does a fantastic job. If he needs it from free agency, he's going to find it in free agency. If he needs it from the draft, he's going to find it in the draft. But he will work many different avenues, trades, you name it. He's going to find the pieces and parts once he sees his team in a holistic way. Hey, what do we have? What can we do? But I think he does a fantastic job of understanding his grades from the draft. Every time you look at that, they're always C's, B's. I mean, they're never, oh, he blew it out. But it doesn't matter because it fits what he wants. And to your point, don't go stretch for a guy who you don't think can complement your football team, irrespective of what everybody else thinks that he can do. Like, what do you think he can do? If he's going to be a player that can play for you, you'll get him whenever you can. If not, move on and trade down.
By the way, all teams conduct mock drafts, believe it or not.
Yeah,
they all
practice
do that exercise, yeah.
But
But they don't make them public like Mel and Todd and all those other guys have to do it.
Well, we certainly know Belichick is a creature of habit. The last time they had 2 first-round picks was back in 2012. Chandler Jones, Donta Hightower. So we'll see if they go with those.
Not a bad haul there.
Pretty good.
There, would you give that a B plus since you're such a tough grader? Let's move along. So after arranging for Colin Kaepernick to work out for the Seahawks this week, Seattle postponed the trip when the quarterback declined to stop kneeling during the national anthem next season. Well, today the team signed quarterback Stephen Morris, according to our Adam Schefter. He's never taken a snap at the NFL level. The undrafted free agent out of Miami has played on 3 practice squads. So back here in the Verizon film room, guys, Pete Carroll, you have to figure, just as a head coach, I feel like he's one of the most open-minded coaches. He's comfortable with change. He's comfortable with making adjustments. But even now, Seattle hasn't been able to make that move. What do you think the plan is here for Cap next? What does he need to do here, Field?
Specific to Seattle, it sounds like the ship has sailed. I mean, signing Stephen Morris yesterday, and someone I spoke with there, I asked just about the backup quarterback, and they said, we got about 15 guys in for visits right now. We're really all in on the draft at the moment. I think if Colin Kaepernick, though, wants to get another NFL job, clearly NFL teams want to hear what his plans are as it pertains to kneeling or not kneeling during the national anthem. And if he says, I plan to kneel, then you have to find a team that's comfortable with that. Because as we know, and Mort has reported this extensively, at the NFL owners' meetings next month, I believe in Atlanta.
In
That's
Atlanta.
going to be a primary point of conversation is how to handle the national anthem.
And he's involved in a collusion lawsuit. And in fact, Jerry Jones is being deposed yesterday on this. So it's, I'll be honest with you, I'm surprised, and I will even say disappointed that he hasn't landed in a spot. But then again, owners own and make a decision. The issue is whether there's been actual collusion, and that isn't all 32 teams. It can be more, if they're having that conversation, are you specifically mentioning him? As far as Seattle, real quick, by the way, they're changing they're doing some culture changing right there. So I don't know.
Richard Sherman, Michael Bennett.
Those controversial players, those big personalities, they've kind of moved on from them.
Lynch moved on. So there's some culture changing.
Guys, just overall, what do you think Kaepernick's going to need to say I hate to say it, but just kind of like get over the hump here for a team to go, all right, like we're willing to do this. What do you think
I think the Seahawks, I mean, it sounds like the Seahawks would have done it. I mean, they signed someone else if he said, I'm not going to kneel for the national anthem. I mean, to Fields' point before, I mean, I think that was the answer. I think I read an article earlier today or yesterday about Eric Reed being asked the same question in Cincinnati with the Bengals. And so I think to Mort's point about ownership and what they're looking for, they have a stance on it. They feel they're going to stand strong to their stance. And for whatever demographic of the NFL fan or whatever fan base you have, they're playing to that. And so for whatever reason, they believe this is going to be the way they're going to run their teams individually or maybe even as an NFL as a whole. And so I think that would be what would have to be said if he wanted a spot.
No need to dance around it. That's what needs to be said. If he said, I'm going to stand for the national anthem and put my hand over my heart like the rest of, or many of my teammates probably will, it might change the conversation within a moment's notice.
Right.
All right, guys, Mike. All right, still to come here on NFL Live. Des Bryant, he's been cut. So what does that mean for the rest of the Cowboys? Can Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott return to rookie form and carry this team? We're to discuss it coming up next. Met today, and the Cowboys have decided to cut the 29-year-old receiver. Brian's future had been the biggest topic of the Cowboys offseason. He was due a base salary of $12.5 million, but the Dallas Cowboys have decided to move on. Bryant, how about these numbers? He hasn't finished with double-digit touchdowns since 2014, but we're still talking about the all-time leader in touchdown catches in Cowboys history. He tied Hall of Famer Bullet Bob Hayes with number 71 in Week 7 and broke the team record with a 13-yard touchdown catch back in Week 13 against the Redskins. Certainly a big part of the Dallas Cowboys organization over the last few years. Meantime, joining us from the Star, our Cowboys reporter, Todd Archer, who's been there all morning long. Todd, how did we get to this point?
Well, Diane, if you think about it, this was a decision that really almost came at the start of free agency. The Cowboys were big players for Sammy Watkins. He opted to go to Kansas City for the 3-year, $48 million deal. Had he signed with the Cowboys, Des Bryant wouldn't have been a Cowboy back in March. The Cowboys opted to wait, see what would develop. They got Allen Hurns. They got Deontay Thompson. There were some trade discussions regarding Bryant, but nothing came to fruition. And now with this move, you have the Cowboys looking to the draft with the 19th overall pick. You look at guys like Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore, Cortland Sutton, James Washington, another Oklahoma State guy. All guys that the Cowboys have either had in for pre-draft visits or worked out independently on their own. So this meeting between Jerry Jones and Des Bryant, I'm told it took all of about 20 minutes. No pay cut was offered. The Cowboys saved $8 million against the cap. Des Bryant's time with the Cowboys now over. A new tenure for a receiver about to start.
Bryant hasn't eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark since 2014. That is our Todd Archer. Todd, thanks so much for joining the show. Meantime, let's take a look back at some brilliant Des Bryant when he was with the Cowboys. 2014 against Jacksonville in London. Tony Romo right over the middle. Bryant makes the catch at the line of scrimmage, breaks the tackle. Another. Going all through, gets all the way into the end zone for the TD. 35-yard touchdown. Just great catch and run by Bryant. Obviously, those two, they certainly work together. Quite a different story, though, now with Dak Prescott. And, that loyalty there, even when we were talking about Tony Romo hanging it up a little bit, or at least when he was about to, that was one of the big stories.
Des was running better, too. That's just a simple crosser. That could be in anybody's offense.
Possession, absolutely.
How about his rookie year against the Bears here? Back to field a punt, takes it on his own 39, makes the move, and gets near the sideline for a 61-yard punt return.
2010 is definitely a different year. Look at those wheels.
Where is it now?
That shake and bake right there. Watch it right here, this edge. Gave it to him.
Oh, it's 2018?
Oh, my word.
Exactly.
That is
Chris,
wheels,
it's 2018.
though.
We're
That's
talking
fantastic.
8 years ago. Good math, me. All right, how about let's go to 2011 here. This is against the Bills. Watch Romo here. Fires this down the right side. Bryant up for the hole, brings it in. What a play this was.
Mossed.
That's what he can do.
That's an important clip right there because the best of Dez Bryant was even when he was covered, he was open. You threw it up, and it wasn't a 50-50. It was a 75-25. Number 88 was coming down with it.
All right, how about 2016 against the Lions here? Dak Prescott now. Deep left side here. Bryant. One-handed touchdown catch. Somehow corrals that ball there with his left hand
And again, this is what he's going to have to do wherever he goes. He's not going to be wide open. He's going to have to make contested catches, continue to be that guy, be a possession guy underneath, make plays with his feet afterwards. But he's going to have to be able to continue to make plays that way.
Yeah, that was 2
Which
seasons
means your
ago.
quarterback has to be a pinpoint accurate guy.
Yep. Yes. All right, let's go 5 years ago then against the Packers. Romo here throws back of the end zone here, and then there's Bryant there that makes the catch. Double coverage too.
Yeah, and just pristine body control, concentration, field awareness of where you are to toe tap in the back of the end zone. Unbelievable stuff right there.
You know, when they talk about separation and his inability to do that, doesn't seem to be a problem in any of these highlights.
Well, listen, Michael Irvin, the Hall of Famer, was not a guy who really separated, but he also had Troy Aikman, who was one of the most accurate passers in the history of football, throwing him the ball. And, you know, let's face it, they had a running game too.
All right, the Lions here. This is 2013. Romo throws that jump ball to the end zone, and he just gets up and brings this right back down, one-handed, comes down with the ball, and probably most importantly, 2 feet right in there for the touchdown. Insane, fired up on the sideline, and you know, guys, the biggest question here is he still this guy? This is, of course, a highlight reel. This is the best of Dez Bryant over his 8-year career with Dallas. But does he still have any of this left?
Well, was he in 2017? No, he was not that guy. But a former teammate of his, DeMarco Murray, showed that even in the middle of your career, you can have a cratering season like Murray did in Philadelphia and then recapture some magic like he did in Tennessee. So I think that's the question, Jeff, is can it be resuscitated, brought back out from inside of Dez Bryant?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think, again, he's not going to be your one. He's not the guy you're going to target and find on each and every down. But he is definitely capable of making something happen, getting open, making some plays that can help your offense. Again, this is not a guy that, I mean, how close to 70 catches last year? I mean, so he's getting, he can get there and make plays for you. He's just not a guy you can overpay or have expectations. One thing that I think goes kind of under the radar with him, too, is that I liked about him as a receiver is in the fourth quarter, he does want the rock.
Yep.
I mean, one thing about him, he does not shrink away
The
from
great
the
ones do.
Yeah, I mean, he wants to go get it. He wants to be part of the action. As a guy who was in a prolific passing attack, every good receiver wants that. They all think they're open, even if they're triple covered, but he's that type of mentality in the huddle that you like to see because when the lights get big, his face gets bigger. He gets more excited for the moment.
I do think those lower leg injuries, took their toll.
Hurt
also.
also. Absolutely.
All right, let's move on from talking about Dez, and let's just look at this Cowboys roster in terms of their receiving core. What's left here?
Well, you've got a player who now, in terms of like your leading wide receiver, that's a slot receiver in Cole Beasley. And a player in Cole Beasley who may have his heir apparent already on the roster in Ryan Switzer, 4th-round pick out of one of the top college programs in the country, North Carolina.
You know that field.
Every show we find a way.
Potentially. But, Terrence Williams, worth noting, he is currently banged up and dealing with a foot injury that's going to keep him out of a lot of this offseason. So there are reps to be had. I know we don't think about practice reps meaning as much in the NFL as the game, which is true. But practice reps matter when you've got a third-year quarterback.
Alan Hearns is the name to watch on that list. With the Jaguars, he reached 1,000 yards. Actually, he got some money out of that. And he was an undrafted guy who overachieved. But, to certainly project that they could draft a receiver, we're doing that. They're picking 19th. Or they could do that in the second round, too. Remember, we've said this. The last 3 years, these rookie receivers have not come into this league and lit it up.
Right.
So there's some risk with taking a receiver in the first round, too.
I think the Cowboys offense gets back on track, not dependent upon who steps up at wide receiver, But if the offensive line reasserts itself as the best in the league,
you
got it.
And I'd say the second layer to that would be Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott's return to that rookie form.
And I think that's a byproduct of the offensive line. You've got about 3/5 of the ingredients in place. Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, Travis Frederick, dominant players on snap and snap.
Byproduct of that is also Ezekiel Elliott being available for 16 games.
That's the key.
Sure.
That's going to be the difference.
That's
Okay, so we say that's the key. But is it possible? Were you guys able to see enough from Dak Prescott last season with and without Zeke? Do you think that they can return to what we saw just 2 seasons ago?
They went 9-7 last year with a lot of stuff going on that wasn't good. And I think Dak Prescott and Mississippi State, to be quite honest with you, was truly undervalued. I thought that was just, people want to say, well, he's a 4th-round pick. No, I saw him play a lot. I watched a lot of SEC football. He should have been drafted much higher. So, yes, the answer is yes.
I think so, too. I don't want to overthink the obvious here, but what is Lyle Collins? As a rookie, he looked really good filling in. And the spotlight shined really bright as a right tackle last year, and there were some up and down moments. If he or somebody else, they signed Cam Fleming, for example, this offseason from the Patriots, a former starter for them, at times at least. If they can get at least 80% of the offensive line playing 15, 16 games this year, I think the whole thing gets better.
The health of Tyron Smith at left tackle, to me, is a big key.
He's got to stay healthy, back got to be all those things. This offense does not run through any receiver, so don't mistake it. It is going to be a plethora of play-action passes off of Ezekiel Elliott. Even if you can get the ball to Elliott with the screen game, get him out of the backfield, use him, ride that guy to the finish line, because that's the best player on your offense. Bottom line, get your offensive line ground and pound. They don't have to necessarily pass block. In case Smith can't play, at least play action helps you with chips or a tight end sitting in there. But it opens your offense up. But it has to be run through Ezekiel Elliott and the run game. If this Cowboys, no receiver they're going to get is going to make that much of an impact.
And it changes. Your offense changes your defense. That sounds silly to think.
Absolutely it does.
Consider this. A couple years ago, the Philadelphia Eagles led the NFL in terms of defensive snaps played because their offense was, unfortunately, they couldn't sustain drives. One of the reasons why 2 years ago the Cowboys were, at least by the numbers, at least a middle-of-the-pack defense, even if talent-wise they weren't there, because they weren't playing a ton of snaps, and when they were, it was, hey, we got a comfortable lead in the fourth quarter, you pin your ears back, you rush the quarterback. Your offense dictates terms and allows you to be playing with a 10 or 14-point lead in the fourth quarter. DeMarcus Lawrence might get 20 sacks next year. Not 14 and a half sacks.
Changes it all.
It changes everything. So I think the offense finding its groove, because I think you would agree objectively that this roster is better on offense than it is on defense.
Yes. Money is there.
Everything
That's
changes there.
So the big story, Des Bryant cut from the Dallas Cowboys after 8 seasons. So, guys, just really quickly around the horn here, are the Cowboys a better or worse team without Des?
I think from a talent standpoint, they're inferior, but I think given all the factors and dynamics involved, I think this team will emerge as a better team than it was last season.
They're a better team if Ezekiel Elliott plays 16 games, period.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree. That's all. Agreed.
Yeah. All right, cool. Still to come, guys. Can do. So back here in studio, guys, here on NFL Live, in about 22 years, Bill Belichick, historically, has never taken a quarterback in the first round of the draft. The highest he's ever drafted a quarterback was, of course, in that second round when he took Jimmy G, who, of course, is no longer with the New England Patriots. So you have to wonder how serious they are about taking Lamar Jackson and how early. So is this a genuine interest that the Patriots have in Lamar?
By all counts, it is a sincere interest, though they are, as they usually do, screening a lot of quarterbacks. But Lamar Jackson and Tom Brady, you couldn't see two different skill sets. But here's what we know. Bill Belichick's a visionary. And he also likes players who are very, listen, if they're a good athlete, they're a good athlete. The other thing is that Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator, when he was in Denver, who did he draft? Tebow. Listen, there's no question this guy's skill set is better than that. So this league is headed in this direction, although they may not have this guy's skill set. But the word that I get, and others do get as well, is that they are scrutinizing him quite a bit.
All right, we got Mel Kiper Jr. here with us on our nice little plasma screen here. Mel, weigh in here in terms of what you think the New England Patriots should do in terms of Lamar Jackson.
Well, they have 4 picks, and Morton, everybody talks about, hey, needs of this football team go beyond a future quarterback. And if you're giving up picks to go up and get a quarterback, then you're not filling those needs. So you're not helping Brady this year, and you're not obviously moving forward improving the base talent of this football team. Like if he's there at 23 and say Buffalo doesn't take him at 12 or 22, or Buffalo packages picks to move up, or Arizona doesn't take him, or Miami, whoever it may be, and he's there at 23, you do your due diligence. He's in the mix. But I think to give up picks with the Patriots having major needs at other areas would make a lot of sense to me. And I think it's pretty rich to say top 10, top 15 for Lamar Jackson, who is not Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was at 67% all 3 years or above. Lamar Jackson was at 57% for his career. So this notion he's the next Deshaun Watson, maybe, but it's going to take some time.
You know, the Patriots have a unique situation this year compared to previous years, most recently the past 2 seasons. These 4 picks allow them, if they'd like to replenish a lot of youth on this roster. But here's what we know about the quarterback position. They need to add a young developmental arm to this roster. It's Brian Hoyer, and that's it, behind a soon-to-be 41-year-old starting quarterback. To Mort's point, they have done their homework on quarterbacks. But last year, there might not have been a team that was more active in its quarterback studies than the Arizona Cardinals. They didn't take a single quarterback when people had them linked to every quarterback available. So your homework can certainly be, we talked about this earlier, they're going to draft based on value. They're not going to, I don't think, overextend for a player at any position, certainly not at a quarterback, when they have their starter right now in Tom Brady, obviously for 2 more seasons under contract.
Yeah, well, we're talking about the Patriots doing their homework. Mel's obviously doing tons of homework on these players. More, you did some homework. You actually reached out to one of Lamar Jackson's former coaches from college.
Actually reached out to a lot of people just trying to get a handle. And, some people, there are some teams concerned whether or not, he is going to be a challenge to learn the NFL game from the traditional standpoint. But he's not a traditional quarterback. And I talked to Garrick McGee, who was his offensive coordinator at Louisville for 2 years. And there were some interesting points. And he said, one of them was, Lamar is going to need a coach who understands the way he learns. If a team takes the approach that they're not going to let him fail, he is going to reward you handsomely. And then I also did speak to Bill Parcells, a Hall of Fame coach, as we talked about. And one thing that Bill said, you get a kid like Lamar Jackson, and you need to find out what he does and what he likes. Too many coaches are married to their systems. Tell me what he can do, not what he can't do.
All right, Jeff Saturday here. I'm seeing the hands going up in the air. Why? What resonated with you there?
Everybody is a system guy. I mean, there are so few players that translate to every system or can go about and play in any system. Very few guys. I'm not going to think Julio Jones, maybe. I mean, you go through the league. As a player, I played in a system that fit my body type, my athleticism, you name it, my mental capacity, all those things. Every player has some type of limitation somewhere in their game. And you find what he does well, accentuate it, make it the best it can be, and it will reward you. It's when guys get stuck on, I'm going to do it this way, this guy has to do it this way every time, or he's not going to be my guy. If you go get a guy like Lamar Jackson, you take his best attributes and you glorify them to the greatest they can be, and then you see what you got there. And we said McDaniels did that with Tebow, went out and got a guy like that. This guy is a football, right, but this guy's a football player.
Yes.
To Fields' points about what Bill Belichick's like, this guy is a football player. Every time you turn the tape on, he shot.
But also to Mel's point, and I've talked to teams about this, they've expressed concerns about some of the accuracy issues. I know people say about Josh Allen, but it's different. There's, outside the numbers, some of those issues, although the counter to that is that in Bobby Petrino's offense at Louisville, there aren't those short passes or tunnel screens that Deshaun Watson was able to do. But I think this is one of those guys who's a polarizing prospect, considering that this guy won a Heisman and almost accounted for 90 touchdowns at Louisville.
Mel, where are the holes in Lamar Jackson's game when you've been watching tape of him?
Exactly what Moore said, outside numbers. I think the accuracy, he makes some brilliant throws. You put the tape on and you will see some wow throws. And also keep in mind, he didn't have the big-time talent around him. Deshaun Watson at Clemson had better players. Mike Williams, Jordan Leggett, Deion Kane, Hunter Renfrow, and others, okay? You think about who Lamar Jackson had. Lost his top receiver, lost his top running back, and he's got a chip on his shoulder. He doesn't want any talk of wide receiver. He put that to rest early on, didn't run a 40 because of that. And I think in New England or on a team with an organization that can develop him into 3 years, like Aaron Rodgers was in Green Bay behind Brett Favre, that would be an ideal scenario. And I think what Mort was talking about and everybody's up there is discussing is, hey, do what he... Why did Bill Parcells and Bill Walsh basically say the same thing? Because they're Hall of Famers and they got it.
Right.
Don't force him to do what you do. Do what he does and do what Bill O'Brien did with Deshaun Watson. I think it's a reason why Bill Walsh and Bill Parcells felt the exact same way. They were winners. They were Hall of Famers, and they can take a player and make him great where others will take him and ruin him. So if he goes to the right guy and the right team, Lamar Jackson in 3 years could emerge as a winning NFL starting signal caller.
Yep.
Just think, guys, a few weeks ago we were talking about him perhaps changing positions.
Well, I've heard people who feel the same way in this league as well, and maybe for 2 years if it doesn't work, as Garrett McGee told me, is this guy is too talented you don't want your best athlete standing on the sidelines for 2 years.
Yep.
So that discussion is going to come if he's not on the field playing quarterback in the first couple of years.
Okay, let me say this really quickly.
Yeah.
I think it's a disservice in a way that we talk about a player being able to just go into another position.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of really good receivers that run really crisp routes, find ways to get open, understand soft in the zone, what to do in man coverage. I don't like when people just go, what? He can automatically.
You're right.
That doesn't mean he's going to be a good player at that. I can tell you.
No,
it's like saying, hey, center, go move to left tackle. I'll play the line, right? It's not the same thing. I don't appreciate
You're
people just cast that net.
Mm-hmm.
That is a much more difficult transition than people act like it is.
Yep.
Well, a player that's certainly not going to change his position, I don't think. Des Bryant, right? All right, I'm Diana Rossini with you. Three-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Des Bryant released by the Cowboys earlier today. Back when Jerry Jones anointed Bryant with the fabled number 88 worn by legendary Cowboys receivers Drew Pearson and Michael Irvin, the Cowboys owner said, quote, I think that Des has a chance to make the kind of impact people that have worn this jersey before, like Pearson and Irvin. Bryant caught plenty of passes and plenty of touchdowns, but a championship eluded him, unlike Cowboys greats before him. Here's our Todd Archer on why Dez's number was up in Dallas.
Deep right side, got him in, what a catch! Oh, brother, what a catch!
I think we are unbeatable. You know, the sky's the limit for us.
The greatest thing about being on the Cowboys, people love to hate the Cowboys.
Nobody loved being a Dallas Cowboy more than Des Bryant. When the Cowboys traded up in the first round of the 2010 draft to take him, he cried tears of joy. He arrived as one of Jerry Jones' biggest gambles. He leaves as one of Jones' best payoffs.
Throws a little fade to Bryant in the end zone, he caught it! Touchdown, Des Bryant! On his horse, by Des! Merry Christmas, Des! Leaping to the end zone, touchdown! What a play by Bryant!
Jones served as a father figure to Bryant, just the way he had with Michael Irvin, Charles Haley, and so many others. Jason Garrett lauded Bryant's growth off the field almost as much as on.
The growth and development that he's made over the course of his career with us has been exponential.
But there were times where Bryant's emotions got the best of him.
We're not done!
Cameras trained on his sideline outbursts, even if they didn't tell the full story.
I'm a very emotional player. I've always been that way. Got to do a better job of controlling, my emotions.
2 years ago, the Cowboys went days without contact with Bryant after he hurt his knee. Last summer, he missed a conditioning test at the start of training camp. Production always has a way of allowing a team to look the other way. His last 1,000-yard season came in 2014. In 2017, he failed to have a 100-yard game.
You can't pay a guy $16.5 million and get 800 yards receiving out of him. How do you improve that position group with that much money tied up in that little production?
The finances no longer matched up with the catches, yards, and touchdowns. Just last month, Bryant told 105.3 The Fan in Dallas he couldn't envision playing for another team.
Can you even imagine the idea of wearing the 8s in another uniform?
Nah, man. Hell no. I do want to bring this city, a championship.
The only team he ever wanted to play for has decided to move on without it.
Well, the emotions are certainly very raw right now for Des Bryant. He took to Twitter right after the meeting, put out a couple tweets. This was one of them. If I didn't have my edge, I got it now. I'm sorry. They got to feel me. It's personal. It's very personal. All right, so the recruiting has begun, guys. Here we go. Players out on tour and are going through it. Like Garrett Blunt, come down in Detroit, bro. Throw up the X is the hashtag, and it's certainly out there. Come to Houston, bro. Of course, Tyrann Mathieu there, and also Jalen Ramsey. Des Bryant, come on to the Jags. So it seems that everybody wants.
None of those guys are general managers or person.
Don't ruin
Not
the
yet.
fun, Chris. Not just
You're
yet.
such a hater, Moore. What's wrong with you?
No,
I like
I
Des.
get
I'm
it.
just saying is
I
like-
hear what you're saying. They're not going to have any.
Nobody can put cash in his hand, right? Except
Yes.
those
That's
guys.
right.
All right, so obviously the conversation now becomes Des no longer with the Dallas Cowboys. Where will he land? And Will he land anywhere? Is his time up? So let's just begin first discussing the teams that could possibly have interest. Field, based on some of the things that you know and the people that you talk to, what are you hearing out there?
Again, we are documented. He's been released for all of an hour and 31 minutes. So name some teams that may come to mind that have a need at wide receiver. The Seattle Seahawks, for example, have a need at wide receiver. The question is that the kind of personality you want to bring in given some of the changes they made to their roster this offseason? I think the Arizona Cardinals still have some wide receiver needs right now. It's basically Larry Fitzgerald and a lot of unproven commodities. I mean, when Chad Williams, your number 2 wide receiver, he's a third-round pick last year out of Grambling, who makes a minimal impact, that tells you where they're at. And then I think beyond that, he has indicated that he will at least explore the NFC East. Perhaps that's the emotion that Jeff was referencing earlier, the idea that you can play Dallas twice a year. But I think we'll have a much clearer picture in the next couple of days here about who might be interested in Dez.
He's going to find a job. There's no question about that. It's like I said, I think the Alshon Jeffrey model from a year ago, a similar type of receiver, not a lot of speed, but able to catch those contested balls. And Alshon turned that into a long-term contract, and it was only a one-year deal, $7 million. So he'll get that. I still think the Ravens. I could see the Ravens being intrigued here.
Yeah, the Ravens. I mean, you see. I mean, if I'm Dez, I'm Dez's agent. I'm calling the big boys. You know, I'm calling the New Englands of the world. I'm calling the Green Bay Packers of the world. I'm calling teams that I think can compete now, and that you have a guy who can put the ball on you and make plays. That's really what I would think. To your point, I think Seattle's a great fit. That would be an interesting one for me, probably the most interesting for me because of what they just did in their locker room. Do they want, they want a boisterous guy? Do they want? Yeah. They always talk about we'll let our guys be our guys. Is that still true? Yep. What's that whole model look like? But I'm going from the top down. I'm not starting the other way. I'm going to find the guy that I think can help me be the best player I can be in those two teams. That's where I'd start.
But as you mentioned earlier too, though, he's going to want to go to a winning team. He's turning 30 in November. He's not going to be. He's not going to want to be part of a program that's rebuilding. But of course, he's looking to get paid as well.
I was going to say, he'll go to a winning team unless a losing team gives him $50 million. Yes. That's not going to happen.
No, don't think so. All right, guys, ahead, Seahawks, we are almost there. All right, so this was the first year of quarterback to quarterback with Russell Wilson on ESPN. Russell met with 4 players: Baker Mayfield, Mason Rudolph, J.T. Barrett, and running back Saquon Barkley. Russell's goal was to help them each get some guidance and figure out what it takes from a mental and physical standpoint to be successful in this league. Here he is with the Penn State star, Saquon Barkley.
Saquon Barkley in the clear. Saquon Barkley all the way to the end zone. Saquon Barkley, say bye-bye.
Barkley hurdles over a defender. How did he stay in bounds?
And Saquon Barkley,
When I watch you play, there's only a few guys in my mind from a different sport that play like you. You remind me of LeBron James. Bro.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you're like LeBron James, King James on the football field, bro.
Thank you. So that's the first time I heard something like that. But he's another level. I got a little debate. I always go back and forth to Kobe, the LeBron, the Michael Jordan, but I do think people need to just sit back and realize what we're witnessing. And if I can have that impact on a sport like LeBron James, I'm definitely doing something right. And if I can continue that to the next level, it would definitely be awesome.
King Barkley.
King Barkley. Let's start it right now. King Barkley. We got to ask LeBron first, make sure he clears that first.
I got to hang out with Saquon a little bit and try to be around his workout regimen. He's an absolute freak athlete. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a football player this athletic.
I see you with the one-hander, though. Ain't nothing to it.
I love going to the gym, but watching you, there's nothing like it.
I love those videos. Everyone sees the success, but they don't know how hard we work to get there.
I wasn't going to be a top 3 pick or whatever, so my mentality is probably a little bit different than yours. What about yours right now? Because I would love to know what it's like to be Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, the way I view that is I truly do not care where I get drafted.
Yeah.
who are you to be like, I don't want to play for this team, or upset about if that team drafts you? I know what you're going to get from me. I can't promise you 2,000 rushing yards, Super Bowl champions, rookie of the year, MVP, this and that and third. I can't promise you that. But I can promise you the approach that I have and to life and to the game of football, and you're going to get a competitor. Because I truly think you need a competitive nature in your life to be successful in life. I'm ready to be the face of a franchise, and I'm ready to be the face of the NFL, to be honest. If you truly think that I'm the best player in the draft, why wouldn't you draft me?
All right, you can watch all 4 episodes of Quarterback to Quarterback April 17th at 7 o'clock Eastern. Russell Wilson's going to sit down with Barkley, Baker Mayfield, Mason Rudolph, and J.T. Barrett. Check that all out, guys. We are less than 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. Meantime, speaking of drafts, Saquon Barkley visiting with the Giants on Sunday, right? So we knew that. Well, yesterday he was spotted at a barbershop in Pennsylvania wearing some Giants gear. Is he sending a message? He's got no control over it. But Field, what do you make of this when you see him wearing that? Wearing the big blue.
Let's not look past the fact that when players go to interviews either during the combine or during the pre-draft visits, team often send them off with a bag worth of team-issued gear. That's just sort of part of the process, a gesture of goodwill for a player that made an effort to meet with them. So I wouldn't read too much into this, although I think we can all agree he would certainly make a lot of sense for the New York Giants at big number 2.
He would be real happy at 2.
Yes.
So I'd put on as many sweatshirts
Eli
as
might
I
be
can.
happy too with it.
Yeah.
What if the Bills trade up, though? That's we don't know about that. We'll see.
There's so many Giants aren't trading down the 12.
I'm not sure he's worried about which team. I just think number 2 would be a really good.
And the $24.5 million he can make?
I think he'll be okay with that part.
And he's got those connections to New York. He's from the Bronx, so maybe there's something there. Meantime, so we're talking about running backs, and there's certainly a lot of depth at this position. So, more just, we know that Saquon is, by the consensus, just the number 1 running back, right, in this draft class. But there are other guys there that you think can go pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when Ezekiel Elliott came out, he's a 3-down running back. I know Jeff can talk about this as well. And this guy is too, although he's not as physical as Zeke. But listen, last year, the NFL's leading rusher was Kareem Hunt, drafted in the 3rd round by John Dorsey. The NFC Rookie of the Year, the NFL Rookie of the Year was Alvin Kamara, a 3rd-round pick. I've been told by some guys that this running back class is even deeper.
Wow.
Whether you want to talk about Darius Geis from LSU or Sony Michel and Nick Chubb from Georgia and Donald Jones from USC and Rashad Penny and Kerryon Johnson, there's a bunch of these guys out there where they think you can find these backs in the 3rd round, 4th round. I've had some people say, we think we got a sleeper in the 6th or 7th round.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and as you know, they're not all 3-down backs.
No, exactly. I mean, when you talk about Barkley, he is a 3-down back. This would be my warning to all of that. And for example, if the Giants take Barkley at 2, he's not going into the same situation that Ezekiel Elliott went into in Dallas at 4, which was a fantastic O-line, a commitment to the run game, all your expectation, a plan in place to be able to run the football. That makes a big difference. If you look at the trend in the NFL right now, when you talk about whether it be Hunt, they have a very creative run game, right, in Kansas City of how they're going to do. Kamara, he's got Ingram to help take the load off of him and shoulder some of the burden. There are a lot of factors that come into how effective a running back can be in the game. And Ezekiel Elliott, in my opinion, is a better out-of-the-backfield type receiver than even Barkley would be right now. So if you look at all of that together, I would say you have to be very careful, and I would agree with Mort. There are a lot of guys who can jump on your board and help advance your team to be a better football team, whether it's 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round, or what you said, the 6th round. But whatever they think. Sleeper, yeah. But when you look at it, you got to be committed to that running back. If you think that guy's going to be a 3-down, you better help him with some O-line play and some true commitment to run schemes that will help him as a player.
Yeah, certainly need more pieces there. Well, maybe Saquon Barkley's starting a new trend, though. Maybe guys will start campaigning for where they want to be drafted.
There you go. Put that giant sweat on.
Exactly. All right, guys, still to come here. That started with the retirements of both head coach Bruce Arians and quarterback Carson Palmer. The Cards were the only team to lose both their primary QB and their coach this offseason, and they filled a coaching void with Steve Wilkes. He spent 2017 as the Panthers defensive coordinator. Arizona got some welcome news, though, from Larry Fitzgerald, who announced he's going to return for the 2018 season. And it looks like he'll be catching passes from Sam Bradford, who was signed by the Cards in March. Bradford recovering from that knee injury that forced him to miss 14 games last season. So let's bring in our draft expert, Mel Kiper Jr., back with us here. Mel, what can you tell us about the Cardinals and their plans to draft a quarterback?
Well, they could go, obviously, quarterback, cornerback, I think. We talked about the whole Lamar Jackson thing. But Jair Alexander, another Louisville Cardinal. We all talk Lamar Jackson. I bet the other Louisville Cardinal defensive player, cornerback, Jair Alexander, injured against Purdue early in the year, comes back late. You go back to 2 years ago when he's intercepting passes, had 5 picks, batting down passes all over the field, 4.38 speed, 5'10 and a quarter, but he's got really long arms. He's a Deion Sanders type in terms of mentality, Diana. He is a real confident kid with a swagger. Jair Alexander, cornerback, Louisville, I think would look good opposite Patrick Peterson with the Arizona Cardinals.
Mel, thanks so much. Here on the desk, we're all keep saying, I hear the guy going, he's a ball hawk, he's a ball hawk. So your assessment is dead on. Mel, thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, so to come here on NFL Live, it's Friday the 13th, so we thought we'd show highlights